Hey guys, it is week 242. Have a handful of reviews for you, an update. Let's hop into this. And the first one is a wild one. And this is Malpertuis from 1971. This is a Belgium film by Harry Kümel, who directed Daughters of Darkness, also released in 1971, maybe made right before this one. Daughters of Darkness is one of the premier vampire films of its time. One of the big kind of, I don't want to say, one of the earlier kind of vampire lesbian stories, along with like the John Roland movies. Just a overall fantastic looking, great film. Blue Underground put that out on 4K in the States, and Radiance Films, who released Malpertuis here, also put that out overseas. But Malpertuis had kind of a shaky release initially. This was, I can't remember who was it, United Artists put some money into it, and their editor just kind of chopped it up and didn't really understand the film according to the director, and they released an English version. With actual Orson Welles, who's in it, speaking English. And then he kind of re-edited with the footage that he had left. And I'm not kind of hard to understand exactly what was going on, but I think that they actually he couldn't actually use the first takes that this guy used, so he had to use like B takes and alternate takes, I think is my understanding, if I'm garnering that correctly. But this is the release that is in French, or is it Flemish? Please forgive me on that one. But yeah, so Malpertuis is an interesting film overall, even with its kind of weird, shaky release story. But yeah, it's based on a novel, which I am not familiar with, which kind of puts me, a little bit at odds here. And a lot of times when you watch art films that are kind of odd or really just bizarre, they don't really always connect with people. That's the total opposite with Malpertuis for me. I absolutely thought it was wonderful. Orson Welles is the big name on the marquee poster, and they had a hell of a time using Orson Welles. He had grown difficult at the time in the early 70s, and he was just overweight at that time and just not really the easiest guy to work with. His performance still turns out excellent. The lead in this movie I knew from two performances. He is a German actor, if I'm not mistaken, or is he French-German? Yeah, I know he's in French films, but he might actually be born in Germany. It's kind of, again, these European actors have a lot of different backgrounds and things like that. But he is in Python 357, which is a great French crime film. He plays a detective in that, an inspector. He's not the main character, but he's great in that. And he's in a really good film called Born for Hell, a.k.a. Naked Massacre, where he plays like a Richard Speck, basically based on Richard Speck. He plays a serial killer in that, and he just turns in a very good performance. He's also fantastic. So he's a sailor that gets off. He's coming out to sea, docks at his hometown. He doesn't really want to leave the boat, but he's eventually kind of... I guess he's interested in seeing his family and everything along those lines. Almost immediately, there's some seedy characters interested in him. He ends up going to kind of a brothel, a big party dance, and he gets knocked out by some, shady characters, and he ends up waking up at his, the patriarch of his family's, homestead, where his sister's there, who he's looking for, and numerous members of his family. Almost immediately, everything's odd. It's off. Nothing is correct here, and Orson Welles is dying. He's the patriarch of the family. He basically gives money to everyone in here. Everybody is super bizarre. The lead kind of love interest, also his sister, and also another love interest in the film. This actress plays three major roles in here. Does a fantastic job. She plays kind of the green-eyed character. And I really don't know how to go about this. How far people would know that Malpertuis, what is it about, and I feel like anybody interested in it would probably have some idea. I kind of went in blind, but I had heard a lot about the film, so after a certain point I kind of came to the conclusion of, this is possibly what's going on, and I was fairly close, but a little off, because the story is just so bizarre and weird, and it does have your kind of the Wizard of Oz, Cabinet of Dr. Caligari kind of story in there as well. Kind of people are alternate people and things of that nature, but it's definitely a mind screw. The entire thing is a mind screw. But it does have a story, and it does have many characters, and all of them are struggling and interesting. It's beautiful, too. The location is beautiful, the giant house, the way it's filmed. It's got like a very much a gothic atmosphere, also the inheritance. And there's a character in this film, a pretty popular actor, from my understanding. And he's kind of a taxidermist, and his acting and his character are incredibly memorable. In fact, when there's like a bit of deranged news delivered in front of everyone else is in shock, and he just starts cackling with laughter. And his insanity was contagious, because I started to cackle with laughter as well, even not even knowing the full, the full idea of everything at that point. But I just thought it was just this kind of brilliant moment of insanity that kind of invaded the real world for a second there. But I was really happy with this release. This movie had a Barrel release on DVD, which I have sitting around here somewhere. Barrel was pretty much an infamous company here, because they did stuff like the York Buckarett movies, Necromantic 1 and 2, and Shrum, and we're supposed to release, they did Darkness, a vampire version, which is a classic low-budget horror film, and they were supposed to put out, a Malpertuis, of course, they were supposed to put out Angst and Dertuskin, and never got around to it before they closed shop. But they were infamous for their releases, and everyone always wanted the Barrel stuff. And I had the Malpertuis, and I never popped it in, but I had heard so many good things about this film. I was super ecstatic to see that Radiance was handling it. I love their work when they handle all sorts of different kinds of films, but sometimes they'll handle horror and horror adjacent films like Messiah of Evil and Themrock, and I just think they do a spectacular job with the stuff. But Malpertuis is an excellent kind of film. If you're a fan of art films or certain mythology, I would highly recommend it. There's tons of features on here. It's a 4K restoration, although it is just a Blu-ray. Not complaining, though. But we have some interviews with Harry Kümel, who is pretty candid about the whole thing. Talks a lot about Orson Welles and how he was not the easiest to work with, how the editor kind of screwed up the movie, and how a lot of the stuff kind of was lost, saying basically this is the best they could make it. Doc on the making of the film, which has interviews with Kümel and other people. Interview with horror expert Jonathan Rigby. This is interesting as well. I don't remember if he's the one who brings up, will people like this movie as much as Stars of Darkness. Maybe Kümel did that. Features on Orson Welles and Susan Hampshire, audio commentary, short film, limited edition, book, and more. And I want to say Harry Kümel does the commentary, or is it a film historian? Because I went through this whole damn thing, and I just want to make sure that I think there's a Harry Kümel commentary, if I'm not mistaken here. Here's a little bit more in-depth special features on here if you guys want to see. A new interview with Kümel, 20 minutes. New interview with author Gothic horror expert Jonathan Rigby, 26. That's interesting. Malpertuis archive and archival documentary about the film, 37. Orson Welles uncut, a featurette on the casting of Welles, including rare outtakes of the actor. It's just a pain in the ass, but still incredible. Susan Hampshire, one actress, 3 parts, an archival interview with the actress, including screen tests and contributions from cast and crew. That's great. Great, fantastic trio of performances. She also does another smaller role. Archival interview with Michael Boguet and Harry Kümel for Belgium Television. John Ray, John Flanders, 1887, 1964, an archival interview with the source novelist and co-writer of Malpertuis. Malpertuis revisited, Harry Kümel visited locations. Malpertuis, the Can Cut, the rejected version of the film, which premiered in Cannes, viewable in English or French, 104 minutes, standard definition here. And this has Orson Welles speaking in English, which is worth checking out just to see Welles in his native language, of course. The Warden of the Tomb, Kümel's early film based on Franz Kafka's play, 37 minutes. And I think the commentary is by Harry Kümel himself. I remember listening to this. It's a decent runtime, but it's a gorgeous film with a lot of gorgeous characters and interesting characters, and I thought it was truly fantastic, unique, and completely different than anything I've seen quite like it. And there's a small group of people that you could really recommend this to that will eat it up. But Malpertuis, great release here with a nice booklet as well. Fantastic. One of Radiance's best releases, and I've pretty much enjoyed everything that they've done to a certain extent. We have one here from Arrow Films, and this is 1981's Peter Hyams film, starring Sean Connery, Outland. So 81, this is one that I've actually never did see. But with the success of a lot of other space films like Alien and Star Wars and things like that, people were kind of taking the Western and just throwing it in space. This is kind of this idea here where, he wanted to make a Western, he wasn't going to get it, so he was like, I'll make it kind of a space Western. Sean Connery is one of the all-time screen greats, right? Now, a lot of people push back. I like the movie star actor, like the big, masculine guys like Burt Reynolds or Clint Eastwood or Sean Connery. And a lot of people don't think they're the best actors. But there's these moments in films where I mean, they have a screen presence, right? Where you get to see them completely shine. And this was one of the times that I got to see Sean Connery shine and just these kind of monologues that he has here. So he's kind of this sheriff that they toss around to go to these mining camps, and he's going to Jupiter's moon where they're mining something. And the productivity here is super high, super top notch. Peter Boyle kind of runs this whole place, and he's this kind of scuzzy kind of guy. And soon enough, Sean Connery realizes there's a lot of kind of weird deaths that are happening, and he wants to kind of figure out what the hell is going on. So he starts to dig under the surface and realizes he's against a lot more than he initially thought. And no one's quite on his side, maybe besides Francis Sturhagen, who is this overworked, sarcastic, sardonic doctor on the ship, who's absolutely hilarious. So Sean Connery kind of teams up with them, and it's up to him to kind of save the day. The thing about this movie is, on the surface, it's like a high noon kind of storyline here. But Sean Connery really steals this film. I quite enjoyed the score. I think it's was it Goldsmith or it's Goldsmith? I always want to say James Horner, but I think it's a Jerry Goldsmith. The score is fantastic. The special effects are really good. Right in the very beginning, we see kind of a head explosion, which were prevalent at the time, which is what the commentary points out. I can't. The editor of Fangoria does one of the commentaries of the previous editor of Fangoria, now filmmaker. So he points out that head explosions were very abundant this time, and that is very correct. Watching tons of horror movies from the early '80s as I have been, and plus seeing head explosions and generally my whole life in films, there's a bunch here, and there's this crazy kind of head explosion here. So something's causing the miners to kind of go nuts. A couple scenes that I want to kind of talk about, and before I get into the whole film in general, is just watching this. Peter Hyams, I'm familiar with stuff like Running Scared with Gregory Hines and Billy Crystal, which I think is an absolutely totally underrated buddy cop action movie. It's just a fantastic movie, which has one of my favorite kind of buddy cop moments in it. But there is an initial scene when Peter Boyle and Sean Connery meet, and they're kind of introducing him to the group of people, and Peter Boyle raises his hand and says, "Hey, I also want to welcome you." And I know people think Peter Boyle, they think Everybody Loves Raymond in more modern context, or even some of his comedy work. But, stuff like Joe and Taxi Driver, Peter Boyle and My Friends of Eddie Coyle and The Brinks Job. Peter Boyle was just kind of a really fantastic actor through the 70s, and Young Frankenstein, of course. But he's just, he's got an intensity about him that often people do not mention in his performances. And this one is incredibly intense. He's just this perfectly cast sleazebag. And Sean Connery and him are talking, and he starts saying, "These guys work hard and they play hard. And sometimes they get in some trouble. You're going to look the other way. Or you're going to want to look the other way." And he's smiling, and Connor's like, well, maybe. Or he's not agreeing to anything. And like as their conversation continues, each one is just a slow pan on Peter Boyle and a slow pan on Sean Connery, and it's cutting back. And I was like, oh man, this is a guy that knows what the fuck he's doing. And I so often watch a lot of low budget films or films and I'm just like, this is just like they don't have those nice little touches. Some of them do, which is always super fun. Or camera work is just batshit crazy, like a Peter Jackson or Sam Raimi early stuff. But just seeing that, like just that beautiful like slow push on both the characters as they move in closer, as they kind of the conversation gets more intent. And you kind of it creates like obviously there's something under the surface on both these guys. But that scene is quite wonderful. And when Sean Connery realizes that he's kind of why he's doing what he's doing, and he gives this great monologue, and you can see in his brow and his eyes and everything how he's registering it, and I just was very impressed with that. I mean, that's like newsflash, Sean Connery is a great actor, but people, they think, well, he's just I don't even know what to say, like he's just a leading man type, you know what I mean? But this time I think that his performance is incredibly charming, and I think he's fantastic in this. The only thing that I think is hokey about this movie, so it does at times remind me of like Silent Running or something a little bit, which I don't think is hokey at all, but what gets hokey in here is the end. So a couple assassins show up, and it gets kind of silly because the way that they're dispatched is very sci-fi instead, and that's probably just maybe a push or something, but it's very cheese-tastic and a little unrealistic, even though you're on a space station, so you kind of buy some of that stuff. But his relationship with his family is also heartfelt, his son and his wife, and he's just an interesting, solid character, not somebody that thinks he's the best thing ever, but just somebody that wants to enforce the law because he thinks it's right. As far as the special, it looks fantastic. It sounds fantastic as well. It's 4K restoration, of course, from the original 35 camera negatives. And then we have, where is it here? Archival commentary by writer-director Peter Hyams. Brand new commentary by film critic Chris Alexander. That's a pretty good one. Corridor of Accidents, a newly filmed interview with director Peter Hyams. That's like 52 minutes. Talks a lot about his career. He talks about talking with Sean Connery, and he says, Connery called him boy because he was so young the entire time, and he kind of got this really good shot. And then after that, Connery saw the Daily, and he stopped calling him boy. And so he's just kind of earned his respect, kind of like, I guess, old kind of Hollywood mentality. Outlandish, a newly filmed interview with director of photography Stephen Goldblatt. Introvision, a newly filmed interview with visual effects artist William Mesa. And this is kind of interesting how they talk a little bit of how some of the special effects were achieved. Interesting stuff there. No Place for Heroes, a brand new appreciation by film scholar Josh Nelson. Hollywood Outland, a brand new visual essay by historian Howard S. Berger. And these are well put together video essays with clips from the film. Theatrical trailer, image gallery, reversible sleeve featuring original and newly commissioned artwork by Pi Par. Double-sided fold-out poster featuring original and newly commissioned artwork by Pi Par. Illustrated collector's booklet featuring new writings by the film by Priscilla Page and Brandon Stresnig. I just also have to give a wonderful shout out to Frances Sirhagen in here. She's an actress that I had seen pop up in a couple things, but her performance is truly wonderful. This movie is just it's really subdued and understated for the first like 2 acts. That's why the third act is a little goofy, but I was really happy with this one. This was a first time watch for me. I'd never seen Outland. And I had heard about it for years. I think I had a DVD sitting here. But really excellent stuff. And I'm a big sci-fi guy. I'm a big Western guy. And you mix the two, and sometimes you're like, is this going to work? And usually it fucking works. So I would recommend this. Peter Hyams, an underrated director. I've seen a handful of his movies, and I really enjoy, like I said, I feel like he did the one with Peter O'Toole, too, if I'm not mistaken, where he's in the boat. See, this is what happens when you get old. You guys are like, yeah, one with Peter O'Toole in the boat. I feel like somebody's grandpa all the time now as I get older, and it just doesn't get any better. It's also excused. I you know what I mean. But anyways, when you're covering 10, 15 films a week, sometimes memories will lapse. But Outland, great stuff. All right, we're going to continue with the Tim Ritter SOV years, and we're going to talk a little bit about Dirty Cop, No Donut from 1998-1999, starring the man, the myth, the legend himself, Joel D. Wynkoop, and this is probably his tour de force performance, I think. This and Creep, and maybe Dan Hess, of course. But, Joel D. Wynkoop is fucking unhinged here. This is the last film that Tim Ritter made in Florida before he moved to Kentucky, and him and Joel D. kind of parted ways for a while. But this is a bizarre one. So Tim Ritter and the special features, commentaries, and stuff like that says kind of got the idea from Cops. Watching Cops, his dad really enjoyed the show, and he saw these cops have such like this big entitlement in the show, like they're like superheroes or whatever. So he's like, what if we did something like that? And along, he also mentions America's Deadliest Video and kind of being inspiration. The thing about Tim Ritter, which I really like, is a lot of directors, they won't admit, like, when they have, this is why this was inspired to this film or that film. Tim Ritter has no shame in being like, well, that seems a lot like Halloween. I thought that this and this and this and this and this. And it makes perfect sense. And Dirty Cop, No Donut, yes, it is inspired by certain things. But I think it's way ahead of its time. You got to think this came out before August Underground. It came out after Man Bites Dog, but it has this weird kind of comedy parody element to it as well before. And August Underground's more serious. But I do think that this kind of underseen when people talk about the SOV kind of style, fake documentary stuff, faux documentary, faux snuff. It's not really snuff, but fake documentary style stuff. And I think that Dirty Cop No Donut is one of the better ones. And I've always enjoyed this film. This is probably, I think it might be my favorite Tim Ritter movie, honestly. So what we have here is we have this cameraman kind of following Joel D. Wynkoop around as Gus Kimball, Officer Friendly, and his escapades in the night. It starts off small where he walks into kind of like an In-N-Out Mart, and he's like drinking and eating and belching and just being a pig. And, at first I was like, man, I was rewatching this. I was like, this seems like the acting is not that great. But the funny thing is they literally just walked in. And they didn't have really permits. They got the permits afterwards. And, like, 2 of the guys are acting like idiots outside, actually just acting like idiots towards the camera and everything like that. But as it progresses, you learn a bit more about Gus Kimball, why he's a bad cop, why he wanted to be a cop, if he is even a cop, all about his father, all sorts of crazy things along that nature. There's a couple, Tim Ritter regulars, including his wife in this one, and of course there is the actor from Wicked Games who's like, yeah, get a life. The guy, one of the boyfriends who he ends up getting like a forced OD on himself. But this is kind of the watch for the idea, which Tim Ritter was always really good about his ideas. He's always great about the creativity of his ideas. Sometimes the budget wasn't always there to help him out, but I always feel like he just had these really smart ideas. And this one is definitely a great idea, and it's there to watch Joel D. Wynkoop kind of just flip his lid. The best line in this film to me is buy a coke, buy an officer of law, buy a coke for the officer of law. That line always cracks me up. The pawn shop scene is absolutely insane, and it kind of like it kind of hits its like crazy climactic frenzy. I think just in terms of insanity when like the car gets smashed in here for real. So if this sounds like it's up your alley, if you're interested in like fake documentaries, like found footage style stuff, then Dirty Cop No Donut is definitely one of the interesting pieces, and it's definitely an oddball that sits in kind of Tim Ritter's career. There are some special features on here. Let's talk about those a bit. We have the original 1998 VHS release. So this is the reason why the commentary that was on the DVD from SRS is not on here, because it's a different edit. I was wondering, because the Joel D. Wynkoop commentary is fucking brilliant on that. He plays it in character as Gus Kimball, and he keeps saying everything's CGI. That's not me. That's CGI. And it is one of the funniest things I've ever heard in my life. New upscale transfer, new commentary director, Tim Ritter and horse scholar Matt Hill. That's pretty interesting stuff. New stills and publicity gallery with commentary, vintage publicity interviews with actor Joel D. Wynkoop and director Tim Ritter, original trailers, DVD promo, Dirty Cop 2, rock video by Richard Anonsky. That's pretty wild and weird, where Gus Kimball kind of stumbles into the woods and meets this kind of religious figure, and it's like 5-minute kind of trailer thing where he's just like screaming and going nuts and eating somebody. Really intense Joel D. Wynkoop kind of stuff. Funny stuff though. But the one thing that like, and I know a lot of people will watch like Sam Raimi or like John Carpenter's Halloween and stuff and be like, man, those movies inspired me to make movies, and I think that is kind of that spirit. But when I like hear Tim Ritter's like stories about how bad he gets screwed over all the fucking time on his releases and stuff like that, I just think, man, how does anybody even want to make movies anymore? And I know that sounds shitty, and it's not like I'm trying to discourage people, but man, Ritter is really the guy who put a lot of heart and soul into this, and you know, he got screwed over quite a bit of times. So I'm just wondering, why would anybody want to do this? And I mean, like, I've had a taste of just acting and making some low budget, but acting in them a lot, and I'm just thinking, this is a hell of a way to make a living, and it's almost damn near impossible, and just to work a side job without insurance, all that kind of stuff like that. It's intense. But watching this kind of brought back some memories. I think my favorite scenes are probably in the pawn shop, but Joel D. Wynkoop as a crazy wild man, and he does a really good job in this, because to go completely nuts. Okay, we're going to talk about Dirty Cop No Donut Part 2, I Am a Pig, which is kind of split up because at this time Tim Ritter moved to Kentucky, and he had really no connections in Kentucky at the time, so he teamed up with Donald Farmer, who's a kind of legendary indie director from the 80s, did a lot of SOB movies, still makes movies to this day. And like anybody, these stories that you listen to, commentaries and things like that, you'll be like, oh, Hugh Gallagher's like, oh yeah, so I talked to Donald Farmer, or read his fanzine, or same thing with Tim Ritter. It's just that Donald Farmer seems to be there at ground zero when this kind of, I guess I don't even know where I'd put this time frame of horror movies came about, but you know, that SOV kind of style stuff a little before that, you know, he'd worked in stuff like that, but he was definitely at ground zero in the SOV fanzine kind of world, in this low budget world. And so he teamed up with him, and he decided to make a new cop who is Cutter, Simon Cutter, I think, and he is cousins or some related to Gus Kimball, and he is kind of being like followed around by the original cameraman, and they're making their version of it, which is the Dirty Cop. And Joel D. Wynkoop is still in Florida, and one of the fanboys kind of guys comes out, and he gets out of jail after going through, they use some Twisted Illusions 2 stuff here. He gets out of jail after kind of being fixed at Sunnyvale. And he kind of goes back to his old ways by being corked by this crazy fanboy, played by Bill Casanelli, BC, who's actually in Dirty Cop No Donut Part 1 as well, as a pedophile. Brave performance, man. I would have not wanted to fucking do that. And he does a pretty good job, honestly. But so he's kind of the cameraman playing a different character here. And the funny stuff is when he comes out, he's like, this is a nice shirt. They gave me this shirt, when he's playing like super sweet. And then he kind of just slowly twists in back into Gus Kimball. And I do think the scene in the convenience store is actually better in this one. I think the acting's a little better and whatnot. But for the most part, I do think it's more of a rehash of the first film, and not quite as good as the first film either. And the second half, and it keeps cutting back and forth, is with Donald Farmer. Now, Donald Farmer turns in a pretty good performance, but the thing is, he's just almost too damn good at it. It's very creepy and bizarre, and the almost half of his is just a girl tied up in a hotel room naked, and you're like, this is just a fetish film at this point. Even Tim Ritter says it's very fetishy, very Jess Franco style, and at that point, it just feels it is uncomfortable, but the point is, it's just also a little tedious to get through on that second part. So I'm like, I don't really like like half of this movie. I don't hate it, and I don't think like the acting's terrible, but some of the side actors in both of these movies, not everyone's gonna be as good or as dedicated as Joel D. Cooper or a lot of those people in the movie, so they're not gonna be great. Some of the side actors can hold their own in both these movies, but some of them are just kind of stick out like a sore thumb, and you could tell the budget constraints hold that kind of stuff back. But overall, I think Dirty Cop No Donut 2 is worth watching if you like the first one a lot. I couldn't get over the kind of mixture in adding the character. I much prefer the Gus Kimball character to the Simon Cutter character. Not that one is just more serious and dark, and it's a weird tonal mixture of the two. So Dirty Cop No Donut 2 I'm not the biggest fan of it, as I prefer the first one. Now, as far as the features go, we have new upscale transfer, new 2023 commentary with director Tim Ritter, commentaries producer star Donald Farmer, new stills and publicity gallery, new Dirty Cop 3 viral videos, Simon vs. Gus. That is fun because they possibly were going to make a third one. New Hall of Shame review montage 2022. So yeah, that's what we have here. So overall the set's coming along nicely. I think that we have one more film and bonus disc here. We have the fourth disc here, Reconciled Through Christ, and extra bonus roundup materials. So yeah, we'll get into that next week, and then kind of close out on what we have here. So it's Tim Ritter SOV collection. Check it out. It sounds like it's up your alley. Okay, we're diving into the third disc in the Furious Swords and Fantastic Warrior set, and we're doing the first in the Fantastic Warrior set, and this is the Fantastic Magic Baby, which is a batshit and crazy title here. Another Chang-Chi. This whole set is all 10 Chang-Chi movies here, and this is very bizarre film here by Chang-Chi. So I've started watching this. I go in blind a lot of times, and I'm like, this is really weird. We have this magic kid in red, and we have this monkey boy and a pigsy, and I'm like, oh, this seems very familiar. And it was pointed out to me that this is basically part of the story of Journey to the West, which is a classic Chinese literature. I'm vaguely familiar with it. It's not something that I'm super knowledgeable about. So I was like, I knew the story just by name and images. So I was like, oh, Monkey Boy and the Pigsy guy. So I knew that kind of element. So this is essentially the story here. Is we have Monkey Boy and a couple of his friends, Pigsy, and another guy who they have a master, of course, or a teacher. And this magic boy is kind of an outcast that is after like this special kind of flesh or whatnot that him and his father and his group of people want to taste the Tang flesh along those lines. So they kidnap his master, and this pits kind of a battle between the two. And the ensuing movie is about an hour of them fighting in random locations. Now this is kind of done in the Peking Chinese opera style, which is this kind of brand of opera where it's a lot of singing and fighting and dancing all kind of mixed into it, which I've never actually seen one live. So this is kind of in that vein. So the backgrounds look really fake on purpose. The sets are obvious sets, all that kind of stuff like that. It's very fantastical, and the characters are very much dancing and fighting all in the same motion. The whole thing is basically an hour of fighting and silly hijinks where the monkey can multiply, where he can he can jump into other people and all sorts of trickery among those lines until kind of these other kind of godly like characters kind of invade and help the whole thing come to a resolution. The fighting is fun, the dancing, the choreographing, all that stuff's pretty cool. The sets are interesting, but it's not something that it's so weird and bizarre and throws you right into it that it's hard to kind of find your footing before the whole thing comes to an end. And you're wondering, hey, there's still like 38 minutes left of this. So what the last 38 minutes of this movie are actually another story from the Journey Among the West, about 38 minutes of Peking Chinese opera. So I was like, this is interesting to watch. It's not necessarily my thing, right, telling a story, but you kind of see that you see the movie and then you kind of see what he was going for, and that like helps definitely for the Western audience. And then they have another story on there that's unrelated to Journey Among the West. That's like 10-15 minutes on there. So that's kind of the gist of the whole thing. There's two commentaries are the only special feature on here, one by Arnie Venema and Mike Leader, and they kind of go just to the movie, the hour and 2-minute movie, and talk about the cast and stuff and what they did and where they went and how this fits into Chang-Chi's career. And the other one is Frank Jin's commentary, where he does kind of similar stuff, but he also talks about the last 40 minutes. He talks about the Chinese Peking opera stuff and how he used to go as a kid and what the kind of importance of all that kind of stuff is. So if it sounds like you're interested, it's definitely an interesting movie, but it's a bizarre film all in all. And I don't know if I can wholeheartedly recommend it for a lot of people, but I do think it's more of the fantastical fantasy element stuff here with a lot of goofy, weird characters. It does have one of the Five Deadly Venoms' first performances in the film as this kind of rock golem character, which is one of the weirdest fight scenes. The rock guys versus the tree guys turn into the centaur. Weird stuff here going on. You get the kind of gist of it. Maybe if you're a super fan of Buddha's Palm, but Buddha's Palm is darker and more serious, and I love that one, so maybe I don't want to say that. But Buddha's Palm I find much better than this. Not that I hate this, it's just a very odd kind of thing. Okay, the next one in the Fantastic Warriors set is The Weird Man, and this was made in 1983. Now, it's not horror enough to include in my 83 kind of watches, but it kind of borders it into the fantastical kind of wuxia, weird kind of stuff here for sure, more so in the supernatural elements, whatnot. So maybe I will count it. I'm not 100% sure. And this is the last film that Chang-Chi directed for the Shaw Brothers. After that, he kind of parted ways. The commentary is really great on this one with David West, and he kind of talks about, what are the reasons for Chang-Chi leaving? Could it be the death of Fu Shang, a possible favorite actor to work with? His budgets were getting, he wasn't getting as much money in, so he kind of just left because he wasn't getting the respect. All these kind of things like that. But The Weird Man doesn't have a lot of high ratings on Letterboxd, and surprisingly, I actually enjoyed this one a little bit more. I just think it's a little bit more straightforward, kind of bizarre story here. Also, I think based on a legend. So what we have here is this general who is just young, and he doesn't, a lot of his guys that work for him don't really think that he's gonna lead them anywhere good, so there's kind of a lot of traitors amongst the midst trying to get rid of him. They'll hire assassins to try to take him out at the same time, and he is just kind of an idiot general. He's not a very likable character. So while he's recovering from an injury, what happens is there's this kind of magic healing guy that travels through the town, and everyone loves him. He'll bring rain when they need rain. He'll heal people's problems, and the general thinks he's a charlatan. So he calls him in, and he decides, if you do not bring me rain, I will execute you. His students are, of course, upset with this idea, and that's when kind of the under guy of the general starts to kind of talk to these students because he wants to get the general out of the way and take his position. So there's all these kind of weird kind of people amongst the midst, kind of being deceitful, which is common in the Shaw Brother kind of catalog. So what happens is he still puts this guy to death, even the Magic Man or the Weird Man, even after all this stuff. But the Weird Man decides to haunt him and jump in other people's bodies and cause these elongated, crazy fight scenes, which exhaust the guy after he's being sick. Even jumping in his fiance and his sister-in-law, or his wife and his sister-in-law, trying to seduce him, which puts these weird kind of elements in there where this guy's trying to sleep with this guy when he's as a woman idea. The actor, I think, is Ricky Chang, and he pops up in some other Chang-Chi movies, but his performance is really great. A lot of acrobatic stuff, and he constantly has a shit-eating grin on his face. I think he does a really good job here. Good fight stuff, choreographing, and a lot of green lighting that Shaw Brothers Ghost Stories are kind of famous for. But I enjoyed this one. I think The Weird Man was bizarre enough and silly enough and fun enough to kind of keep my attention. And the commentary is really good as well, talking about Chang-Chi's career and also Ricky Chang and all that kind of stuff like that. But overall, I think that The Weird Man is one that I like better than the Fantastic Magic Man, which Magic Boy. I can't remember Magic Boy, but a lot of the titles are alternate names so many often times. But I thought The Weird Man was pretty interesting and pretty good, and a bizarre Shaw Brothers film for 1983 when you compare it to the stuff they were putting out horror movies were The Seeding of a Ghost and Boxer's Omen and whatnot. Okay, next up is one from Full Moon, and this is the last of the Subspecies films that needed a Blu-ray release. This is Subspecies 4 Bloodstorm from 1998, directed by Ted Nicolau, who did the first 3 Blood Subspecies films, and he did Vampire Journals, and he also did stuff like TerrorVision and Bad Channels and part of Dungeon Master. So Ted Nicolau did tons of stuff for Full Moon and Charlie Band and Empire and stuff like that. So the first Subspecies movie, I'm going to take some heat for this. I'm not the biggest fan of it. I do think it's a little overrated. I think Red Dew is amazing. I think the small creature stuff was really cool. I think Angus Scrimm is fun, but I love this the setting and the atmosphere. But the movie never really fully worked for me. Now, saying that, Subspecies 2 came in, and I absolutely adored it. I thought it was so much more fast-paced. I thought it added the mother character in there, and it just worked really well. It's one of Full Moon's best films. Subspecies 3 continued that kind of attitude, and they were shot back to back. They're almost like one giant movie. So I really like Subspecies 3 as well. By the time we get to 4, they kind of leave it that Subspecies 3 would be the end of it. Of course, there's always room to add. You can never kill a vampire, really, right? They're always going to be back if there's money to be made. As I think Troy Howarth often joked about, the only way to kill... he quoted somebody, I remember one of the videos, he said something about the only way to kill a vampire is put a stake to the heart of the producer. So, And who would want to do that? It's a good old Charlie Band. But Subspecies 4 here. Yeah, so this one is at an hour and 31 minutes, which is long for a full moon, and it's kind of bloated for a Subspecies movie, especially after you got part 2 and 3, which go at a breakneck speed and are the most enjoyable of the series. This one, what we have here is some of the remaining survivors are killed off, really in a lame way, which sometimes happens. I'm looking at you, Alien 3, which kind of leaves a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths when they're watching this kind of thing, especially super fans. Radu is brought back to life via the Bloodstone, being close to his proximity of his kind of destroyed body, and his kind of love interest is, as a vampire, still alive. She gets taken into a hospital where the doctor is also a vampire, and he knows of the Bloodstone, so he wants to get the Bloodstone. At the same time, I think we bring in characters. It's been so long since I watched Vampire Journals. We bring in characters from Vampire Journals that know Radu, that somehow want the Bloodstone. So there's a lot of deceitful stuff, as they are villainous vampires, and you could expect that. Radu looks cool. He's got some great lines in here, as he always does. Not as like caliber of Doug Bradley and Pinhead or something like that, but I do think some of the lines are really creepy and generally great. I think he's probably one of the best part of if not the best part of this series, to be honest. But he has some good lines. There's some decent gore in here, including beheadings and stuff like that. But it's really talky. It gets really boring in a lot of ways. And overall, I think this is one of the weaker. I think this is the weakest of the first 4, and maybe 5 if you include Vampire Journals. I haven't got a chance to watch part 5 yet, which has recently been made. But this one just didn't work for me as well as the second and third one. Maybe it's a little late in the game. Maybe it's just a little too bloated. Maybe it's a little too talky. Maybe it's so far away from the castle atmosphere that it started to lose me, because a lot of this takes place in the doctor's lab and whatnot and things like that. But overall, I think that Subspecies for Bloodstorm, is it Bloodstorm? It's Bloodstorm. I'm so hard with these. It's like Bloodstorm. It's not quite up to snuff as the previous installments, but I know that a lot of people are probably been waiting for this Blu-ray for a long time, and that the elements were lost forever, right? I think it was edited on tape, so like the film elements were not there. But this one has been AI upscaled. It is in full screen. It's been AI upscaled, and it does look, like it has been AI upscaled. But I don't think the elements are there to do it. So it's from the best possible elements. I don't know if you guys still want to hold on to your old DVD, which I think is just a VHS transfer as well. And I'm not even sure if it's in widescreen, to be honest. But as far as special features, we just have the original video zone and some Subspecies trailers, which is kind of a bummer. But yeah, the original video zone talks a little bit, has the cast members and whatnot, and Ted Nicolau talking about killing off some of the classic characters and whatnot. But, it's cool to see it finally kind of have all of them on Blu-ray. I have the first 3 in kind of a set. But yeah, Subspecies, one of the biggest and one of the most proud that Full Moon series did. They have that in the Puppet Master and the Trancers, which I think the first Trancers might have been Empire. But regardless, yeah, so you got all these on Blu-ray now, so check it out. All right, we're going to get those 1983 movies, and the first one here is Bloody Flesh, or Carne de Carne, which flesh to my flesh or blood to my blood, but Bloody Flesh is what we'll call it. This is a Colombian film. It's part of the kind of what they call the Caliwood movement, and the film from last year from '82 called Pure Blood or Puerta Sangre, which I thought was a great film, is part of this as well. Those directors often kind of, I think that they kind of were in each other's films as actors and whatnot. So I think the actor from Pure Sangre, the director that's in this, is an actor, and vice versa. I think that's kind of how it works. Kind of a little mixed up on that. But this one is interesting. It takes place in the 50s, and all these Caliwood movies seem to be kind of like pushing like social kind of boundaries, but they also seem to have political nature, maybe some like kind of talking about classism and whatnot. They definitely seem to be pushing some people's buttons here. There's a couple more of them that are horror films that I'll definitely get to. One from '86 and one, I believe, from '88 or something along those lines. But this one I thought was super interesting, and it was one of the ones that was on my list to be a hidden gem. One of these ones that you see around, and I've seen it and really recently got a nice remaster, so hopefully it gets a release stateside, and I'm just like, Bloody Flesh probably is one to look out for when I was studying the year and everything like that. So putting this in, I was slightly disappointed, but not in a bad way. And reflection, I think that it is a good film, and I do enjoy it. But what we have here in the very beginning is this really kind of horrible, it seems to be a bunch of people were killed, and we have this kind of guy, and he's toying with this what is it, it's turkey vulture or something along, he calls it a peacock, but he's torturing this kind of this bird, and he blows its head off. And normally I've seen so many movies where there's animal cruelty, but I think the interaction between him and the bird for a long period of time before it's done just added this sense of disgust, and my instinct, which rarely ever happens, was turn this off. Like, I just was like, oh fuck, like it just right off the bat, it was such a nasty scene. And I'm not taking points away for that. I mean, it's 1983, it is what it is. Even if you don't don't like it, which I don't like it. It is what it is. So I was just like, oh boy, that's a hell of a way to catch my attention right off the cuff. So what happens is the matriarch of this family, an older woman, like I said, this is the 50s, 50 something, I can't remember exactly, but she dies. So the family comes together, and there's been kind of a half brother, half sister that have been kind of separated, and they come together, and there's almost an immediate attraction. And you're like, this is not right. They're definitely not acting like brother and sister. They have some sort of weird sexual tension in here. And they start spending more and more time together. And there is one scene where they're kind of walking around looking at these flowers. And this family, they kind of explain, like, I'll get to this part, they're looking at these flowers, and the girl says, the sister says, what's wrong with this one? It looks kind of like it died, this orchid. And she says, well, that's what happens when they interbreed. And it's just like, oh shit. Like, it's right there. You knew exactly what this movie was, where it's going, why this family is so bizarre in the first place, right? And it just says it all in that one little moment right there, that big kind of foreshadowing. So you kind of introduced to this family through these old home videos, and you kind of know who everybody is, and they're set up for later things like that. And what happens is there's kind of this bomb attack within the political unrest, which seems to be in this country at the time. And I guess they're kind of suggesting or hinting at that the possibility that something has been brought back to life or awakened within the family, or maybe the tombs of everything like that. So these two kind of become isolated where they go, and of course they're going to fall into their desires, and the girl seems to be more in line with kind of a possessed, almost vampire-like creature, and it's going to get more and more kind of I guess you would say taboo breaking and whatnot. It's not as explicit as one might think, but the ideas are there, and it's a pretty twisted little weird movie that's part ghost story, part vampire film, part of possession, obsession, incestuous psychological film. Overall, I think Bloody Flesh is a film for brave film fans that I think you should view. South America tends to not pull their punches when it comes to early horror films. I've noticed that quite a bit. You know, they kind of are not afraid, and it's so different from the stuff from Brazil. The Brazil stuff, a lot of it seems softcore, but also very transgressive in a lot of ways too. But when you look at Pure Blood and this, they are transgressive and stuff like that, but they're also seemingly, pushing people's buttons politically, and you're just like, oh man, they're definitely going after like kind of the rich families in this. But I think that Bloody Flesh is a movie that the more you think about, the more you talk about, the better it will reflect in your mind, if that makes any sense. And I definitely will give this one a rewatch, and I definitely would buy this on Blu-ray just because it's a interesting film. Sometimes the best films aren't always the best to watch or easiest to watch, and this one definitely needs a rewatch because I do think that there's a little bit of drag time in it. I think there's some saggy middle, but overall Bloody Flesh is interesting stuff, and I would recommend it. A little bit of change of scenery here, but I didn't want to forget this one. It's another one from 1983, another TV film, Deadly Lessons, by the director who kind of did a few TV horror films early on in the 80s. He did Fantasies from 1982, kind of the slasher, light slasher thriller where the guy's stalking soap opera, actors. And he also did This House Possessed in 1981, which is kind of a haunted house, kind of like Demon Seed style thing, if I remember correctly. But this one here has a really good cast. It has Diane Franklin coming off Amityville 2: The Possession, Alan Sheedy, Nancy Cartwright, Donald Holton from One Dark Night. It's got Bill Paxton in an early role, after Night Warning 81, Mortuary 82. So Bill Paxton has a little trajectory of horror films, eventually getting in Terminator, Aliens, Near Dark, and whatnot. And also got Rick Rossovich, who's in Aliens, along with Bill Paxton. So it's got a great cast. The actor who actually plays the detective in here gives a really nice little performance towards the end of the movie in a double twist, which is kind of the double twist kind of makes it stand out a little bit. But Deadly Lessons starts off with kind of somebody drowning at this kind of rich girl school, elite girls, bullies, whatnot. And so the detectives come in, they think there might be some foul play, and more girls start to end up dead. The first twist, I kind of spoiling that there's a double twist here, but these TV movies, it is what it is. It's a little dull. The movie moves kind of like somewhat like Molasses, but that end kind of twist and the big kind of speech and reveal and exposition dump is worth it. Overall, I think the acting is pretty decent. I think that, the idea that not many people have probably seen this, and it's got a nice little like kind of cast here, light kind of slasher thriller fare. Not a bad TV movie from 83 at all. Just maybe not the most memorable, but maybe interesting again, just because it's so forgotten and the quality is so bad on it. It's just a TV rip. If it was maybe better quality and stuff, things would stand out. Some of the girls have some good characters and some good dialogue moments and everything like that. But the TV of it all does hold it back a little bit, and that's not always the case with stuff like Don't Go to Sleep or Dark Knight of the Scarecrow. The TV of it all doesn't hold those movies back at all. They're great, but this one is just decent TV movie, Deadly Lessons. So check it out if it sounds like it's up your alley, and let me know if you kind of like the switch up of angles. I mean, I am more comfortable here, but there's probably more noises, worse lighting for sure. But you know how it goes, guys. Okay, the next one here is The Boogey Man II, directed by Ulai Lamel and Bruce something. I think he kind of fixed some of it. I'm not sure the history of this movie, because obviously it's fucked up if you've ever seen this movie. So it kind of follows suit or sets the precedent for something like Silent Night, Deadly Night 2, right? Where we have The Boogey Man from 1980, which is a really weird movie by Ulai Lamel. I mean, he directed stuff like Tenderness of the Wolf, a fantastic movie. He would direct Evansville Tear from 83 as well, which is a pretty solid film. But this one here, The Boogey Man II, is a fucking mess. The Boogey Man 1 is a messy enough to me. Honestly, the first Boogey Man is kind of incoherent nonsense to me. It's always kind of been like that. But a lot of people really enjoy it. It does have good special effects, John Carradine. So part 2, I was like, what are we doing here? I heard this is one of the absolute worst films ever made. So the survivor of the first film is somehow in Hollywood or whatnot. I'm not sure if she actually made it there. And a bunch of like aspiring filmmakers are like, we should make a movie about the thing that happened to you. We should do that. And she's like, a little leery, I guess, but eventually she kind of tells her whole life story, and the first half of the movie is riddled. First hour of the movie is riddled with flashbacks, all the gore scenes from the first movie, everybody getting killed, including the nonsensical mirror from across the lake reflecting and killing somebody. It's just the dumbest thing ever, and I don't know why anybody else doesn't find it so stupid. But so what happens is that little piece of mirror is missing, and it somehow ends up around all these people, and they start getting killed in even dumber ways, including one death by toothbrush, if you will. Is this supposed to be a parody? I don't know. And death by shaving cream, and then it kind of all ties together at the very end. I wouldn't say ties together. It all comes together somehow at the end with Ulai Lamel being very meta and seeing some weird like haunted thing. It's nonsense. It's crap. I'd say 50 to 60% is The Boogey Man 1. Barely a movie. Probably as bad as I thought it'd be. Some of I mean, like, I couldn't remember exactly all the deaths from part 1, which one's which, but Boogey Man 2 is definitely not one that you want to watch. I know that they ended up making part 3 in 1994, and then there's, of course, 2 unrelated movies called The Boogey Man, and then there's even some more low-budget movies called The Boogey Man, spelled different, I think, with the I-E, which I've never seen. But yeah, The Boogey Man is everywhere. Boogey Man 2 is bad. If you didn't like Boogey Man 1, I know a lot of people do. This is much worse. This is probably, if you don't watch it alone. It'll probably drive you to tears or to drinking or to boredom. You'll probably just take a nap, though, honestly. Boogey Man 2, not good, obviously. Also, video nasty, which is bizarre. All right, this one here is a doozy. The last from 1983 is Jungle Heat, a.k.a. Dance of the Dwarfs. And this stars Peter Fonda and Deborah Rafkin. Deborah Rafkin's in Death Wish 3, God Told Me To. Yeah, Peter Fonda, of course, in Easy Rider and a million other things here. So this tape was made in 1988, but this bad boy is made in 1983. Directed by Gus Trikanis, who did a couple movies that I know I've seen a couple, and I definitely was looking at his filmography. It's like, oh, yeah, he did a couple decent ones. I know he did Swinging Barmaids. But this also has John Amos in pretty much a throwaway role, bizarre role too. So this is crap. This is a crappy movie. It's part jungle adventure, part nonsense. So it reminds me of the movie with Larry Hagman where he's flying the chopper. That's a better movie. And just your typical kind of like jungle adventure film in the vein of A Massacre at Dinosaur Valley without like the kind of fun sleaze or anything of that nature. Peter Fonda is kind of a drunk has-been. He used to fly a chopper in Vietnam, but now he's kind of isolated in this certain area because he can't go back to the States because he doesn't want to pay alimony. Great guy. Drinks all the fucking time. He's your standard character type. Like, I'm a grizzled ex-pilot, cantankerous asshole, but somehow I'm going to find my way. And Deborah Rafkin is a doctor or biologist, some sort of fucking anthropologist, some shit where she wants to go to this isolated jungle where people are being killed off, kind of by like these weird ghouly hand things. There's also obviously some, military kind of intervention there, some sort of criminals within the area and whatnot. I can't remember exactly where they take place at, but so he flies her out to this kind of camp. They crash, whatnot, and they kind of have to survive. He ends up getting clean. They become this weird shaky relationship where they constantly argue. They don't have much chemistry, to be honest. It's pretty poor chemistry, and for the most part, nothing really happens. happens until the last 30 minutes where we kind of get the dwarfs. We see the dwarfs, and the dwarfs are kind of these reptilian guys, and it turns kind of into like a really bad version of Island of the Fishmen, aka Screamers. But you know what? Screamers Island of the Fishmen is not that great anyways, but we kind of have that element where these little kind of ghouly things are coming out after them. They're not ghoulies necessarily, they're little kind of lizard things, and there's some decent action in the last 20 minutes. This is based on a fucking book, believe it or not, and I heard the book is even worse than the movie, which I guess I could believe, because I can't imagine reading this thing. Overall, this is really tedious to get through. It's just the dialogue is not funny. It just feels flat. I guess some of the chopper stuff is okay. This is just painful. It's not enough. The gore effects that they do have, there's a couple people that get kind of killed that are decent, and this is a PG. I wonder if there's a longer version or some of this was cut out. I know there was a DVD some overseas somewhere, but all I got is this VHS here, and it says 93 minutes. This fucker is not 93 minutes, more like 88 minutes, but we'll be okay here. Yeah, John Amos is a throwaway role as kind of this guy that, this kind of native guy that's like, yes, don't come out here at dark. It's like, what a fucking waste. Maybe they saw him in Beastmaster and are like, we got to get that guy in here. I don't know. But Peter Fonda, I like Peter Fonda. It's just, this is a waste. And it's not like the actors are bad. It's just that the script and the dialogue is bad, and the movie's just pacing is awful. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen. It's not like Boogey Man II level, but it's not good. It's not good. 83, I'm not having a good time right now. Bloody Flesh and House of Long Shadows and The Sins of Dorian Gray are probably the top of the heap for right now. Maybe I'm missing one or something like that, but yeah, the rest not great, and I'm at like 15 16 movies already. Okay, the Patreon pick is one from 1985, and this is Affectionately Yours, not the 1941 movie. This is a Hong Kong film, and I think Ryan Cannon picked this one. I bumped him up to the list because he hadn't been picked for a while, so this is the film he picked. And this is a romantic comedy from Hong Kong, fish out of water story here. We have this kind of flower, he works at a flower shop, flower wholesale, and his girlfriend breaks up with him even before we can see it. He's carrying this tub down the road that he paid for, and you realize this guy kind of gets pushed over. Doesn't have great luck. His best friend is Eric Chang, Sang, who's in Three Extremes 1, called Three, and he, that guy's also in Fatal Vacation. Just a good kind of Hong Kong character actor. And basically what happens is that Eric Chang's sister is madly in love with him, so they get him drunk and make it seem like he slept with her, and then guilt him into marrying her. Although she's pretty intolerable. Their honeymoon is in Japan, and everything starts going wrong. They can't get a picture. Their camera gets stolen. They get sick. She gets sick on her first night, so on the honeymoon. So she spends and spends and spends. They spend a lot of time making her really dislikable, because what happens would make him dislikable otherwise, although he was tricked into this marriage. So it's an odd kind of humor thing that, or an 80s thing that's probably a little dated, that people will be like, well, this is kind of fucked up, but it's played as comedy. But hey, comedy is crazy, right? And it's supposed to be kind of wacky and weird and almost offensive, because it's not the norm, to a certain extent. Kind of outlandish shit here. So what happens is he meets this Japanese woman while he's out by himself, and he starts almost immediately falling in love with her. He starts making up excuses why to leave his wife in the hotel during their honeymoon, and keeps going out to her, and it kind of gets more and more ridiculous until it turns into a more of a serious love story here. Overall, I think it's decent. I think it's your kind of standard fish out of water story, but a little bit different, because it's a character from Hong Kong coming there and being in Japan, which you don't often see. And of course the Japanese girl's parents have this idea that they had this forbidden love, and this one kind of is the same time a love that cannot be. But overall, I thought it was cute. I thought the soundtrack was really well done. Enjoyed the soundtrack. A lot of catchy songs here, and I enjoyed it. I do enjoy a romantic comedy here and there, and it was interesting to see kind of a Hong Kong romantic comedy, as I've only seen the ones that involve kind of fantasy or ghost or things of that nature, because stuff like Till Death Do We Scare, or that those films do have this romantic element to them, but of course there's ghost and special effects and silliness. But this one, pretty straightforward. I enjoyed it, and I liked it. And the lead I liked. He's been in a bunch of movies. I can't think of his name, but the actor I know, of course, is going to be the kind of the character actor or whatever in the wacky weird movies. But yeah, decent movie, cool Patreon pick. All right, we're going to do these questions, comments, and concerns. Nick from Flanders: In the Mouth of Madness, easily one of Mr. Carpenter's best, and that is saying something. Yes, I do enjoy horror stories with just a dash of old Lovecraft, like Scott Shermer's Harvest Lake, which sadly you weren't in. Almost was in that. The Arrow release seems worth the upgrade for sure. Also, the film features in then almost unknown John Glover, who sadly hasn't done that much horror except for 2016's We Go On, from the director of Witch in the Window and Yellow Brick Road. This is the film. The film is about what you might Be Beyond Death's Veil. Can't wait to watch it in All Hallows Eve. I think I've actually seen We Go On. He's also in Home, the one that just came out this year. I think it's called Home or something along those lines with Pete Davidson. Pretty fun film. Questions: which Lovecraft story should they adapt next? I mean, everybody wants to see At the Mountains of Madness, a big budgeted one, of course, or a big budgeted Call of Cthulhu or something like that. How long did you go trick or treating? Age 10, age 15? You still do? Probably age 15, but it really was just kind of walk around and hang out with friends and not really get candy. But I probably went to get candy till age 14. Is Halloween becoming too commercial? I mean, I don't know what you mean by that. In the States, Halloween has always been fairly popular. There's times where it dipped out, where we'd have no trick-or-treaters, and now the trick-or-treating's coming back. So I will always want more and more Halloween. Commercial. All holidays are commercial. That's the nature of the beast. Please keep entertaining us amongst all the world's madness, sir. Next time, God willing. P.S. That weird word, that French variant of an anthology movie, I believe you pronounce it portmanteau in the States. That's maybe in the mouth of madness. Okay, that's a double comment I accidentally did here. What we got? What the flick? Man, I met Michael Ironside at a horror convention last year, and he was super cool, but it was still one of the weirdest convention experiences I've ever had. Brandon Timmons. So last weekend I drove put to a town near Philly for a 24-hour marathon. I watched consecutively in one sitting, all on 35mm prints in a packed theater, the Colonial Theater from the Blob remake. Okay, so my friend Bruce Holchak went to this, and he was posting which movies were playing. So here we go. Black Sabbath, classic. Elvira Mistress, dark, fun movie. Sleepwalkers, underappreciated. Blood and Roses is one that Roger Vadim, I need to watch that, but it's never been really a great release. The Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane, Innocent Blood, Jack Be Nimble, Messiah of Evil, my favorite of this experience. Love Messiah of Evil. Killer Party, Bliss, love Bliss. Night of the Seagulls, Tourist Trap, Witchboard, Bram Stoker's Dracula, and Slither. Very cool. Slither's a good way to end. This is one of the most exhausting and delirious things I've ever done, and absolutely love the experience overall. Would you try going to something like this? And what are some of your favorite experiences you've had seeing 35mm print in repertory theater? Cheers. You know what? I've never seen any. I've been to some retro screenings, but I'm not big to go to a lot of these theaters like that. I just never did it, which is really, I know, odd for people like that. We don't get those big times, and I don't think I could watch a 24-hour movie marathon. I have trouble staying up for a lot of things now because I work and the way it is. I just don't know how you guys even manage to stay up, to be honest. That's insane to me. Gray Nunez gives smiley face. Beyond 55. It's interesting how taste in film endings can change depending on life experiences. When I was young nihilist, I believed bleak endings with no hope. I loved bleak endings with no hope. Now, as an older father full of faith, I prefer more happy endings, hopeful endings now. LOL. To me, the right ending for the right movie. I think I don't have any distinct endings. Sometimes the ending fits, sometimes it doesn't. I don't, I don't think, well, I'd want this happy ending or that ending. Some movies I'm like, there should be one. Sometimes I feel like there shouldn't be one. Sometimes I feel like there should be one that doesn't have any. Just kind of like The Thing, where it's like, who knows? Beyond. He also says Poltergeist is also very bad because trauma is to movies as fast food is to food. LOL. I don't know about that. I get what your point though. Elk Vomit. Did my question from last week not make the cut? No. I record these on Thursday. Which version of Cooper from Night of the Living Dead is more of a piece of shit, original or 1990? Tough. 1990. I think he's a bigger asshole. Way up, dude. Popcorn. Up thumbs. Give me the thing. Yep. Ken Coakley. I composed this last week, but I think I was late. I watched a couple of movies over the weekend. One was Arrow. One was on Arrow. It was called Resolution. It was more of a dark comedy. It's about a guy going to his best friend's cabin to help get off drugs. The addict wasn't so willing to get sober. The movie's hilarious. Yeah, I remember that movie. And has Bill Oberst Jr. in there. Good performance. I also watched the latest VHS installment, VHS Halloween. I was dying to see this because VHS is one of my favorite franchises. My calendar year revolves around Halloween. I really wanted to love this film, but it's disappointing. The wraparound story was street trash ripoff. The first story bothered me because the high-pitched voice saying Coochie Coochie 2 made my Asperger's flare up, and the little person posing as a baby looked like Mini-Me. The moving door was a bit much. Who brokered the sale on the house? Willy Wonka? Did the wallpaper taste like schnozberries? I couldn't understand the second one because I don't understand Spanish and I couldn't read the subtitles. Cutting to the last segment was about a college kid's trick-or-treating and grab candy that looked like genitalia, men's genitalia. The product name should have been called the Wang Dang Doodle. Hopefully they make a better one next year. The one question of or few questions, did you film Cinema Wasteland? If not, that's okay as long as you had a good time. After the entertainment you provide us, you deserve it. I appreciate it. I did not. Like I said, I mentioned it. I just didn't want to film in there, and it just, I don't know. I had a good time, but it was quite a little bit shakier this time around. Also, how long I've been going to Cinema Wasteland? At least since 2009. I don't remember. I'd have to go back and think. My friend Cage knows all of it, so like he knows everything about Wasteland, so he could tell me. I went one time before he did, so I'll get back to you on that. Do you stay at a hotel during the weekend, or do you go just for the day then drive home? Is there a show that you would like to attend? I would have liked to attend the Monroeville Mall, which is going away. I've been to that mall, but I never went to the show, and it's the last one. It just happened, or it's about to happen, and there's no way I can afford it. But I stay usually on October. I'll stay the whole time, and lately I've been going for April, which they're only going to April. There's only doing April shows from now on at Cinema Wasteland. I usually just go for a Saturday in April, so this next one I might just go for a Saturday, and the one after that I might stay for the whole weekend, depending. I went to. He says would like it at 10. I went to Rock and Shock every year from 2005 to 2019. Then they stopped when I started walking again and finally leave this place. I'm going to move to Texas. When I get there, I want to go to Texas Frightmare Weekend. I'd like to check that one out too. And then he continues for this week. I watched The Mouth of Madness for my upteenth time yesterday. It's easily one of Carpenter's best 90s efforts. It had a great cast, namely Sam Neill, who did this a year after Jurassic Park. He had some humor, especially in the beginning, yelling from his cell, "I didn't mean to kick you in the balls. It was a lucky shot." Then a couple minutes later, hearing the music saying, "Oh my god, not the Carpenters too." Neil's one of my go-to guys when I want to watch a good film, whether it's Attack Force Z or My Brilliant Career. He almost replaced Roger Moore's James Bond and Octopussy, then The Living Daylights. David Warner was also in The Mouth of Madness again, another go-to guy. Agreed. Fun fact, Warner was signed to play Freddy Krueger, but that fell through. Of course, Charlton Heston did this year, the year after Tombstone. This film looked to me like an episode of Twilight Zone if the episode were written by Lovecraft. The soundtrack was great as well. Yeah, great soundtrack. I should have mentioned that. Fantastic soundtrack as well. But yeah, let's get into this update, guys. All right, got my Vinegar Syndrome order and still waiting for my Hisayasu Sada one here. But boom, we got The Man Who Could Cheat Death. I believe this is a 4K. This is a fun Hammer film with Anton Drifton in it. It's been a long time since I watched this one, a few years at least. But I remember enjoying this one. Good film for sure. Next up, we got Tromeo and Juliet, a great Troma film. Rewatched this a couple years ago, and man, it held up better than I had ever remembered it being, but a lot of fun. Enjoyed that one. We have a 4K of Ruby, which it's been a long time since I watched this one as well, but this has, of course, why is my mind sipping? Carrie's mom. She's great in here. Fantastic performance in Carrie. She does a good job in this one as well. Interesting film. I think that's a Curtis Harrington movie, if I'm not mistaken. And then we have Sleepless, which is an underrated film by Dario Argento, 4K here. Good one. 98. For a long time, people always said this was his last good film. I think that Dark Glasses is pretty good as well. So I do enjoy Sleepless, probably more than most. And then we have Men from the Gutter, the Shaw Brothers film here. I dig this one for sure. It's been a while, though. Again, I've seen a lot of these movies. This one's just been a while. This is kind of like the Youth Gone Wild movie, if I'm not mistaken. There's a few of those from that time, so I might be mixing them up. Then we have Jimmy and Stiggs, the Joe Bigos film. I've loved or liked almost all Joe Bigos' films, so this is one that I definitely grabbed on 4K. Definitely will watch this for next week for my 2025 watches. Then we have The Fireworks Woman, which is Wes Craven's porno film. The film he directed after, was it between, what did he do this before Last House? I think it's in between Last House and The Left and The Hills Have Eyes. But yeah, very, very interesting to check out Wes Craven's porno film here. And then we have The Evilmaker. Is this the Saturn's Core? Yeah, Evilmaker. And of course, this sequel, The Abomination, The Evilmaker II. These are movies that I've always seen floating around that I've actually never watched. Then we have one here from this VHS Shitfest. This is Marley's Revenge, the monster movie. I've heard of the title only in passing. They say only the good die young, but no one said they'd come back. It's late 80s, early 90s, if I'm not mistaken. Then we have Backyard Bloodbaths. We have a featuring, we have Slumber Horror Day, 777, Black Mama, and more. There we go. This looks pretty fun, and this is from Bleeding Skull video. And last we have the Maiku Hama Trilogy. This is from Connie, which is a great label, to be honest. The Most Terrible Tune in My Life, Stairway to the Distant Past, and The Trap. So yeah, I picked this up. I'm a big fan of Asian cinema, but Connie does a lot of great work. So that is the update. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Let's get out of here. All right, guys, thank you very much for watching, and as always, have a good one.